And then if you left the stage with a mic and said, what's success to you? We get crickets. So if you don't know what success is, either in your business or your personal life, then crafting the path to get there is impossible.
Welcome to Corporate Competitor Podcast, presented by Forbes Books, the show where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is Jack Daly, one of my favorite people on the planet, a force of nature who's built businesses, coached thousands of CEOs, and run marathons on all 7 continents. He's the best-selling author of Hyper Sales Growth and Life by Design. And what sets him apart is that he lives what he teaches. Jack's story is a masterclass in discipline, curiosity, and intentional living. Today, we're going to talk about what sports taught him about business, the value of a personal playbook, and why clarity and accountability matter in leadership. Check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Don, I'm really excited to be here with you. And, having just seen you live just a couple months ago, even more so. Good to be here.
Well, you make that mention, and we did. We had the chance to share a stage at the Gathering of Titans event, which was fantastic. And then a few days later in DC, I got to watch you be presented with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Very cool. And so it's always an honor to be in your presence. You're one of one. It's really amazing. But as I was preparing and going through the research that was done on you, one of the things that stuck out is your commitment to tracking all aspects of life. You're intentional about it, right? And so one of the things we saw was since 2011, you have tracked things like your hours of sleep, workouts, visits with your children, books you've read, movies you've watched, because you want to be designing your life, not letting life design you. And how has that practice shaped you, and how did it begin?
So I'm going to give you the beginning because I think that's really a powerful, powerful story for anybody to walk away with. And that is, I was caddying at 13 years old, and I thought I knew what that job was. Carry the bag, find the ball, wash the ball, rake the trap, tend the pin, all of those normal things that you would do as a caddy. But, I'm the oldest of 5 kids, Don, and we grew up in a house with one toilet. 3 of my 4 siblings are delivering mail for the U.S. Postal Service. We were a pretty poor family, and it was 6 miles to walk to the golf course, and then I'd caddy 1 or 2 rounds, single or double bags, and then I'd walk home these 6 miles. And what I learned after about 10 days there is these guys that were golfing, and they were all male back then, they were golfing on Wednesday. They were golfing on Friday. Like, those are work days and the weekend. And they drove nice cars and lived in big homes. And I didn't have any of that. And I just said, gosh, wait a second. This is an opportunity to learn from people that are in places I'd like to be, different than where I am right now. And so I had a fixed mindset back then that, well, they would never talk to me. How could I get their time in their office? And then I pushed myself and said, but wait a second, they come to my office. It's called the golf course. And I'm going to spend 4 hours walking side by side with these people. So I'm going to ask them the questions. So I came up with all the questions. I practiced the questions whenever I could get the mirror in the bathroom. And then I was ready. And I would ask them as if they were natural questions coming at that spur of the moment. Now, I want you to visualize, Don, you going and being pummeled by this 13-year-old kid with questions during your round. And you go into the clubhouse to grab a beer at the end of the day, and you see a friend and say, hey, did you ever have that kid, Jack Daly, carry your bag? Oh, yeah. Did he ask you the questions? Like, I became this known guy that asked these questions of members, and they ended up investing in me, investing their knowledge,
Mhm.
investing their experience, and investing their advice. And the biggest thing I took away, Don, was this. You got to have goals. You have to write them down. If you don't write them down, they don't work. Um, don't pick too many, otherwise you'll dilute your energy. And share them with as many people as possible. And so I picked four goals where I wanted to be at the age of 30 when I'm old, because at 13 that seemed really far away. And then I just backed it off and backed it into what do I need to do between 13 and 14? So when you talk about the word intentionality, I have had intentionality running through me since I was 13 years old. And the big takeaway that I get, and I get kidded all the time about all this tracking business. The one that gets everybody is I track whether I floss my teeth or not every day. Um, and that people are busted on me, but things that get measured get done, right? And so if it's important to you, then you know, let's figure out what it is that's going to get you to the desired place that you want to be, right? So I say it this way. We have one life to live. Why not make it intentionally magnificent? And I say that to my coach clients in business, and I say that to people in their personal lives. If you look, you speak to a lot of audiences and a lot of big groups, but if you were to visualize yourself in front of those audiences and came out on stage and said, by a show of hands, how many people would like to be more successful than you are already? Well, you and I both know all the hands will be up. That's right. Some guys would be too.
Dude, right.
And then if you left the stage with a mic and said, "What's success to you?" We get crickets. So if you don't know what success is, either in your business or your personal life, then crafting the path to get there is impossible, right? So
Yeah.
that was the shaping part of the answer to the question. It has shaped my life with intentionality, and it's so goal driven. And interestingly enough, and I think you know this by now as well, our definition of success changes over time,
Absolutely.
right?
Right.
It's not a one and done. We've got to sit down and kind of take inventory on a regular basis as to what success is.
So begs the question, what is Jack Daly today? How do you define success?
That we all get 168 hours every week. We're all equal when it comes to time. And I can make more money. I can make more businesses. I can qualify for more sports to play. There's a lot of flexibility in life. Uh, the only thing I can't make is more time. So how do we invest our 168 hours? Where do we spend those? So success for me is first family and friends and quality time in relationships. And then I have a overriding, if you will, mantra of make a difference in people's lives. Find a way to open up their minds in terms of their personal life or their business. And as you know, I've written some books on the business side of the world, but I also during the pandemic wrote one on how to live a richer life as well, right? And
Right.
so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that person that says, "Wow, I came across you in life, and I and the world around me has benefited as a result of that."
Mm,
That's where
wow.
I'm at.
Wow. So this, I know some, as you said, some people bust your chops on tracking, right? But to use a sports analogy, right? You actually, it's a scoreboard for you, right? You're constantly measuring yourself and making sure, and by measuring it, you're accountable. You're holding yourself accountable. If you're one of our listeners and you're trying to figure out how could I take that lesson that Jack Daly used and that way that he started tracking things. What kind of tracking tools? What is there anything that you would suggest to them to help them maybe follow a little bit of this pattern?
Yeah. Before I do that, I want to key on a word that you used just a moment ago in your question, and
Yes,
that
sir.
was holding yourself accountable.
Right.
I don't think that's enough.
Mm,
And so if you go back to my story of the golf course and the interviews, share it with as many people as possible,
mhm,
because if you share it with people, then there's some accountability beyond yourself. Yeah.
mm,
So as an example, I have two websites, one on the business and one on the personal life, and my goals are posted at the beginning of the year and stay up on those websites all year round. My bucket list is up on both websites. And I want people to be looking at it and then sending me some note that says, "Are you really doing this?" Or "How are you doing on this?" Or "If you're in North Carolina, maybe we could do this together." And so I know every day I wake up and people are watching, right? In
mm.
addition to that, on the accountability side, I have five people that I call the board of directors of my life, and they're very close people, and um, and they have to qualify in two fashions. One, care immensely about me, and the second qualification is that they won't be overpowered by me. They're going to be tough to take me on. And so those five people individually meet with me four times a year. So if you think about five people four times a year, that's 20 times. There's not a month that goes by where somebody isn't calling me out, right?
Right.
Now, when you go back to the tool, I'm going to show you a tool that's so simplistic. And people come up to me after I speak in front of groups and say, "There's an app for that." I know there's an app for that, but this has worked for me for decades upon decades. My office, where I am today, is filled with these logs. So it is a simple month at a glance calendar system, and in here are my goals that were written at the first of the year. This is on my personal life. This is not my business, and this is what's posted up on the website.
Oh
Um,
my.
and so all of that is out there. And then inside this planner, every day I write down every single thing I did that day that relates to anything that are in those goals. At the end of the month, I then have my key indicators of things that are important in getting to the goals and a month by month tracking. So there it is through July. And if I want, I can look at where I was last year for a year to year, month to month lookup. Now, this is where the audience or the people that are watching or listening to me are calling me the crazy man, right?
Right.
But quarterly, I post on social media my what I call tail of the tape. And it's here's where I am now versus here was where I was last year, and here is how I am compared to goals.
Mm.
Now, I'm doing that naturally on the personal side of my life, and then on the business side, maybe even a little more, right?
That is so. I mean, the intentionality to it is the key. But what one lesson you taught me when we were together that I've already started to apply because I'm fascinated by it is the idea of creating your bucket list and sharing it with people. A lot of people have bucket lists. Most times it never escapes their head, right? Boy, one day I'm going to do X, right? One day I'm going to go Y.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, most people don't commit them to writing, but you don't just commit them to writing, you share them out to the world. And there's some really great reasons for that, and some cool things have happened as a result.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Can you tell me a little bit about that and your bucket list strategy?
Yeah, yes. So I'm really glad that you're digging into the bucket. Uh,
We've now put a big board up in our dining room that actually has our bucket list. My wife and I put one together where it's filling itself out regularly.
how cool is that?
Yeah.
So, let's do a couple examples. Um, I on my bucket list, I wanted to run a marathon, and I wanted to run it under 4 hours. So at 46 years old, uh, I ran my first marathon, and I didn't make the sub 4 hours because I got blisters at mile 10. And by 18, I was changing my gait and I was stressing things that hadn't been stressed before. But I finished at about 4:15. Well, I was in good enough shape to go sub 4, so I looked around for another marathon and I found one and I went sub 4. So, check the bucket list. However, about a month later, I'm thinking, I'm so goal oriented. If I put down I'm going to run a marathon each year, then I probably would stay in better shape. So, I decided to put on my bucket list run a marathon yearly. Well, in the next 10 years, I ran 10 marathons, 9 in California, where I live, and 1 in Portland, Oregon, where I did my first one. And in my 4th LA marathon, my 10th marathon, a guy ran by me with a shirt, and on the back it said, I ran a marathon in all 50 states. So I caught back up with him and I said, tell me about the 50 state thing. And he said, there's a club on the internet, 50 state plus DC. Check it out. So I checked it out, put it on my bucket list, run a marathon in all 50 states. Well, some of these marathons are pretty small in the small states, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, that type of thing. And you start to see the same guys because they're the 50 staters. So I'm in New Hampshire and a guy says to me, are you doing the 7? And I'm like, the 7? What's the 7? And he said the 7 continents. And I said, you run a marathon on 7 continents? He goes, yeah, check it out on the internet. So I go on the internet, I join the club, and now I put it on the bucket list. And by the way, that includes Antarctica. And so they have 2 of them. You go by boat or plane to get there. So
You ran the Antarctica one with our good friend Mark Moses, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. And his
I love
son, Mason. So then, and then I have some favorites like New York Marathon, Boston Marathon, that type of thing. All of a sudden, it was up to in the 80s with my marathons. And I go, well, I probably should do 100. So I put 100 on my bucket list. And then I had to figure out where I was going to do my 100th. And now I chose the first ever marathon in Athens, Greece. So when people look at my bucket list, it's got all of these check marks next to marathon in 50 states, marathon in 7 continents. But it wasn't, I didn't start that way. Remember, it started with something, what I'm going to call a little bit more simple, 1 marathon, right? And then there was an evolutionary process. Watch this one. I got a gift at Christmas from a good friend. It was the top 100 golf courses in the United States. And I paged through it. It was a coffee table book with photos and so forth. And I said, you know what? That'd be a good bucket list. Play the top 100 golf courses in the United States. And so all of a sudden, I'm in front of audiences, and many of them are YPO members, EO members, CEOs and entrepreneurs that own businesses and are members of country clubs. And so I would just mention I'm playing the top 100 golf courses, and guys would come up to me afterwards and say, have you played this one? I can get you on. You played this one? I can get you on. Now, if I don't broadcast, they can't help me.
You don't get the help. Right.
People can't help you if they don't know what you want. And by the way, you can't get what you want if you haven't figured out what you want. Now, this one is the one that blows my mind the most. So Don, I put on my bucket list, I wanted to fly a jet fighter plane. And a guy sees it. He sends me an email. He says, have you checked that box yet? And I said, no. And he said, well, I bought a plane from the U.S. Air Force. It's a jet fighter plane. He attached the photo and he said, with this qualified, I said, heck yeah. And so he said, we just need to find a place and meet and let's do it. So Wee Chen was the guy's name. He's about 6'5". He gets out of his jet fighter plane, introduces himself to me, hands me a blue helmet, puts me in the cockpit behind him. We take off. He does a bunch of acrobatics up there and then levels the plane off and says, are you ready? And I said, what else is left? And he said, well, you wanted to fly it. And he instructed me to grab a hold of the toggle switch and take control of the plane. And here I am, in a jet fighter plane that no flying instructions, none whatsoever, but put things on your list and watch the magic take place with people coming out of the woodwork to help you. That's what I know.
Research shows that 80% of us believe we have a book within us. But the number of people who follow through and do the work to create that book is far, far less. The reason is that the process can seem so overwhelming. And that is why I have partnered with Forbes Books to make the process easier for those of you who listen to this podcast and believe you have a story in you. So if you're ready to turn your leadership experience into your legacy, start your journey with us today at Forbes Books. Visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. I love it. But again, I love that your 2 points. People can help you. People can't help you if they don't know what you want, but you can't tell them until you know what you want.
Absolutely.
Those are so. By the way, I know in the marathon story, one of the pieces that stood out was, you ran the New York Marathon with the V Foundation team. I'm on the V board, so I love the V Foundation. Grateful for you, but your motivation for that was from a deeply personal place. So it wasn't just running a marathon. This one meant even a little more. Tell us, would you share?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I want the listener to track the dates on this. My wife Bonnie was diagnosed with pancreatic stage 4 cancer in February of 2017. February 2017. In March of 2017, I got solicited by the Jimmy V Foundation to run the New York Marathon for cancer research. Now, they did not know that Bonnie got diagnosed 30 days earlier. What they knew is I'm running a marathon all over the country, so this guy's a good candidate, right? And so I'm thinking, well, that makes a lot of sense, but I'm tending to my wife who's battling for her life. When is the New York Marathon? Oh, I know it's in the first week of November. So I go onto the website, and that year, 2017, it's November 5. I met my wife Bonnie for the very first time, November 5, 1965. And I went to her and said, look at this. They want me to run for cancer research at Jimmy V. The race is November 5 when we met. And she said, you got to go. You got to go do it. And so I put the word out, and people loved my wife. And I shattered the fundraising at Jimmy V in the history of it forever, and raised over $250,000 to run the New York City Marathon. Before I left on Thursday to run the race on Sunday, I said to her, I don't know if I should leave because you're really near the end. And Bonnie turned to me and said, with all the people that have supported us, you have to go. And then she leaned in on me and said, I'll wait for you to get back. She'll wait for me to get back. And so I ran on November 5, and on November 6th, I flew back, and the doctor, I saw Bonnie, and the doctor walked me down the hall and said, "We're going to unplug her from everything." And November 11, 6 days after running the marathon, she passed away. Uh, and yeah, it's the the New York Marathon is a favorite of mine anyway, but it really has really special significance for me.
Wow, that is, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I know one of the things that really stood out to me, Jack, every time I've seen you speak and I watch the way you interact with people is just how completely vulnerable you make yourself, right? You are so, where does that come from?
Uh, I guess I don't know how to answer the question because I can't imagine being any other way.
Mm,
Um, um, uh, you know, as a professional speaker for 30 years, um, if I try to please everyone in the room, I'm not probably going to be effective.
you please no one, right?
Yeah. And so when I watch you, uh, it screams authenticity.
Mm,
Uh, you're not making up stories. You're sharing parts of your life with your audiences, and so we have that in common. It's authentic. It's the real deal. Yeah.
Jack, thank you. You know, um, it's an outgrowth of one of the lines we used earlier, but one sentence that you've said repeatedly that's so wonderful is you can't get there unless you know where there is, right? And when you're coaching CEOs, which I know you do a lot, how do you help them define what there is? Because I think a lot of people are so scattered and they don't, and like you said, they don't really have a true there. How are you coaching them to find that?
Yeah. So, um, you know, we're into the V word here, the vision word, uh, and too often, in my opinion, companies come up with a very flowery worded sentence of the vision. What I want to know is, what does it look like at the end? What does it look like when you're done? Can you paint the picture for me? Like, what is success as this company? Paint that picture for me. And I'd also say to people listening, I do the same thing with people's personal lives. Paint your picture.
Mhm.
Paint the picture of what is success and what is ideal. And once you've got that, now you know what there is. Remember my 13 years old, I picked 4 goals.
Mhm.
I picked where I wanted to be at 30 years old. Um, and I wanted to know what I look like financially at 30, what I look like professionally at 30, what did I look like education at 30, and what was my family going to look like at 30. And once I knew what there was, I could then start making actions that will get me there quite probably quicker than had I not kind of detailed it out. You're pretty well read, and I don't know how many books you've written. It's just
A
outrageous.
lot.
but but I'm a voracious reader. I've moved to audio primarily, but I'm averaging 100 books a year. I read one just in the last 60 days that's very powerful. It's called The Five Types of Wealth. And the five types of wealth, when we hear the word wealth, we tend to think money. Well, that's one of the five types, but there's another that's called time. There's another that's called health. There's another that's called, are you in your zone? Are you in your happy place doing the things that you should be doing? And the fifth one is relationships. Have you built strong relationships? And the book actually takes you through and gives you a little quiz on each to see where you're at and things that you can do to take action to get you better and more wealthy. Uh, That book is so powerful. I use that with my clients in terms of where are you investing your 168 hours, right?
Mm,
Like you and I both hear this all the time, how our audiences know how important exercise is, but they can't find the time.
mhm.
Um, we all have the same amount of time. It's just what are we prioritizing? And I want to be around for my grandkids if they want to run a marathon and want their grandpop Jack Daly to run it. I got to stay in good enough shape, but I'll cover the 26.2.
Yeah. You had a great line in one of the podcasts that I listened to that you've done that in prep, in which you said that sports teams are run better than most businesses because no coach sends players out without a playbook. And I love that, and I know that a business playbook is an important part of your teaching, like your kind. So why do you think so many business leaders skip this idea of actually um, giving their team a true playbook?
Yeah. So before I answer that question, there's three important reasons that I think sports teams are run better than most businesses. One is the playbook. We'll come back to that. And the second is they practice more than they play, and you live in the world of sports. And then watch the practice sessions. The coach is on the field, the coach is on the court, the coach is on the ice, belly to belly, face to face with the players. So in business, what I find is, and I spend a lot more time in the sales side than anywhere. The coach, the sales manager, the VP of sales is sitting behind a computer screen in an office, not out in the field with their players. And if I look at a sales group and say, "When's the last time you practiced?" They're looking at me like I'm a guy from a different world, right? And so if you're not practicing inside the company, where are you practicing on real deals? That would be We would laugh if a sports team said they're going to practice on the game schedule, right? Like it's lunacy. And then we're back to the playbook. There's hardly anything that goes on that you couldn't anticipate before you get there. As a result, there's no reason to not be better prepared. So
So
why?
preparing for objections, preparing
Yeah,
for right.
exactly. Well, why should I do business with your company? Well, you ought to have a really differentiated answer to that than, we're knowledgeable, we're competent, we're competitive. Everybody can say those things. What is it that's uniquely different and better about your company and you as a person to do business with? So what we say is figure out, as you said, those objections. People think there's millions. There's less than 15, really. Figure out the most frequent objections and give the best answers. Put them in the playbook and practice the answers so that you're ready to go. So back to your question, why aren't people doing that? I'm going to use a phrase that many people have heard before. People and companies tend to underperform to their capabilities because we rush to the urgent at the expense of the important.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no urgency in building a playbook. We can open up our business every day without a playbook. It won't run as well as it could, but to sit down and commemorate what are those objections, what is the reason that we should do business with your company, and then to drill it into our team, that makes all the sense in the world to me.
The 13-year-old story is really dramatic because of the odds, right? I mean, what 13-year-old would actually ask those questions and do that? But I don't think it's odd in that it's true of almost all of us, right? Many of us end up in the presence of successful people. Many of us get an opportunity at some stage to engage with someone that is doing something or has something we might aspire to, but very few of us actually ever ask. We seldom take advantage of that opportunity. What what coaching would you give to those of us who might struggle with the ask?
So, so as a well-read person, I have several favorites of books, but the favorite book is Mindset by
By Carol
Carol
Dweck?
Dweck. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you know, she puts us into one of two categories, a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset person says to themselves, well, I'm not going to ask that person the question because
They'll never answer it.
and all the reasons why, right? The growth mindset person says, hey, there's probably the answer. Let's go. Let's go figure it out, right? Uh, and so I'm going to give the listener real comfort. I happen to think with all the years behind me and all the experiences, I probably have a few answers. You know what? One of the best things ever is for people to just reach out and ask. I give a lot of books away that I've written, but I'm worried about the ones I give away for free because if you pay $20 for a book, you've got a little bit of skin in the game. It might prompt you to read it, right?
Right.
I love
Yep.
going into people's homes and looking at their
Seeing what they
bookshelves.
have.
And I take the books out, and the majority have only dented the first or second chapter.
Oh yeah, that's so true. Jack, I know you've mentioned your books, and I can't wait for the teen version of Life by Design. But where can people buy your books? I want to make sure that we can tell them here on the podcast.
Well, I mean, all the traditional places, right? So
We
you,
always say you can buy them where good books are sold. If they're not selling your book there, it's not a good bookstore. Just FYI.
so, so you can go to my websites, or you can go to Amazon, or you can go to Audible, and or you can go to a variety of different bookstores. I mean, they're pretty widespread availability.
Awesome. Okay, good. Jack, I want to ask you a question we have been in conversation about for the last couple of years. It's the idea of momentum, right? In sports, a lot of people believe you can see it, you can feel it. I've been in the study of it for several years now to write a book that just recently came out on the science of momentum. But I'd love to ask you, can you think of a time when momentum was working for you in an organization and where you just it almost felt, I mean, you used the word magic several times in this podcast. It almost felt like magic was in your hands.
Um, I, uh, I did a few Ironmans in my life, and what's really comical about doing an Ironman for me is that at 58 years old, I did not know how to swim. And so it starts with a 2.4 mile swim on the clock, and then a 112-mile bike on the clock, and then a 26.2 mile run. Well, and it goes in that order: swim, bike, run. Um, when I raced in New Zealand at Lake Taupo in the Ironman, it was a massively rainy day from start to finish. It never stopped. And when you got to the run, puddles are all over the place, and it's cold and dark now, and that type of thing. Well, I don't know whether you're aware of it, but they put your age in magic marker on the back of your calf. And mine when I did Ironman New Zealand, I'm in my 60s. Well, there aren't a lot of higher numbers out there. And and when you get to the run portion, you're in my hood. You're in my neighborhood because there's probably not many guys in the Ironman racing 100 marathons. So I'd go behind you and I'd see your number, and your age might be 42. And I'd get ahead of you. I'd pause and let you look at my number. It was like ripping your heart out from your chest. And every time I did it, I'm looking for a new number to pass. I passed over 200 people in the run. And all I felt like was momentum. And I had one of the best races ever because I was no longer running 26.2 miles. All I was doing was clipping guys' calves. What's that guy's age and that guy's age and that guy's age? It was an absolute blast. Momentum, momentum makes the pain go away.
Oh,
Really,
what a great line.
it absolutely does. And I say that in business as well as in personal.
Wow. Jack, I know we mentioned earlier your willingness to give, your willingness to be a partner with people to help others grow. Uh, Today, the opportunity you gave us, an hour on your calendar. Hopefully, I'll end up in that notebook, 1 hour, Don Yeager. But the idea that you gave it to us and today joined us as a corporate competitor, I cannot express more gratitude than I have for you right now.
Well, here's the thing. Your reach is so broad that I couldn't wait to be here today because I know we made a difference.
Hmm.
And I thank you and your team for putting this thing on. Absolutely.
I hope you could feel the energy just coming through the microphone, just coming through the conversation. I'm magnetically drawn to Jack Daly. There's nothing that I want to learn that I don't think I can learn from him. I love this story. My first point from today's conversation was that whole story about him being 13 years old, being a caddy, and the fact that he recognized he was in the presence of successful people and that he should take advantage of that opportunity to learn, to make himself better. How good is that? And think about what he learned, a master class at 13 years old from successful people that he had access to. Now, juxtapose that with our lives and how many times we run into successful people, how many times we have a chance to encounter people who are successful. And do we ask the questions? Do we take advantage of the opportunity? Do we do as Jack did? I think a 13-year-old Jack would tell you it makes a difference, right? Secondly, I want to just talk about the intentionality he brings to everything he does. I loved his showing us that week in a glance and the ability to understand how he sets goals, how he makes he then tracks himself against those goals, and he constantly is evaluating every day. Am I moving something forward? Am I making progress toward the things I want to do, be, and experience over the course of time? Think about it. At 76 years old, there are an awful lot of people that are headed to the couch that are looking for cruise control. Jack Daly, he's still got his foot on the gas because he is designing these areas of his life that he still wants to improve. I just so magical. And then finally, I love the idea that he is so committed to publishing his goals and his bucket list on his websites. He wants the world to know these are things I'm setting out to do. But by making that public, by it doesn't just improve accountability, it also improves opportunity. People who see his notes on his site are reaching out and offering to help him achieve bucket list items. The story of the Air Force jet, fantastic. Jack Daly inspires me, has for many years, and I hope that today he inspires you. I appreciate you.